Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I'll be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open our studios to the public. For more information, you can go to the website svos.org. Our guest for Talk Art, Colleen Sullivan, is an experimental multidisciplinary artist who uses gestural line to create her beautiful abstract imagery. She will show us a printmaking process that begins with her drawings. So welcome, Colleen.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell me a little bit about what you think it means to be an experimental artist. That's an interesting term.
I call myself an experimental artist because I use, in what I do, different processes. I'm not a multimedia artist, I'm an experimental artist.
Right.
I bring whatever materials I need to into the act of making a drawing. And I'll do whatever I can. I'll put different materials together that you wouldn't think. I'll put white paint on charcoal, which will make things dirty. I'll put watercolor and thick acrylic, oil sticks, anything that you would normally not think should go together. I'll put that together and I'll just see what happens. And so that's.
Do you start with an end in mind when you're doing this, or is it more of a process? No,
I start by putting lines on the paper. I'll very often have something I'm drawing, like I'll draw figures, and then I will put another mark on top of that. Then I'll pull in some paint. I'll smudge that with my hand. I'll put my hand marks, anything that it takes to express what I'm thinking or getting the meaning into what I need.
So where do you find your inspiration then for these images?
Most of my artwork starts with figure drawing, actually.
Oh.
Not all of it, but very often I do, on an ongoing basis, I do a model drawing class, although that is sort of deceptive because it was started by Edward Stanton, and he called it the drawing circus. And
interesting.
That is a very interesting.
Not what I think of when I think of model drawing.
It's a bit like a circus. Sometimes we would have acrobats. He would hire acrobats. They would wear theatrical gear, masks. Sometimes you couldn't even see the face. They might be dressed. I remember one time there was a pile of leaves in the middle of the floor and the model was in the leaves. And the model moves all the time.
Oh, interesting. So it's movement based. So
That's
the gesture that you use is based on the movement. Oh, very interesting.
That's right. So
cool.
Everything is fast.
So you brought some images for us to take a look at.
I did.
These gestural drawings.
I did.
So let's take a look at those now.
All right. This is a figure that I drew in one of these drawing circus classes. You can see that I've used lots of different materials here. I've used graphite, charcoal, I've smudged, I've used a waxy kind of crayon, watercolor, ink, anything it takes. And the marks are not meant to describe the figure. They're meant to put the figure in a kind of a context of what I was thinking, frankly. This is another model drawing class, drawing circus drawing. And in this case, you almost might think that there's a possibility of two figures being in that picture.
Or a shadow of the one in the front.
But very rarely do we have two models. In this case, there was only one model, and I just felt like I would I needed some more black in there. I needed to balance the composition. I needed to, it felt like it was becoming two people. And I used colored inks in this case. I used graphite, water-soluble graphite. And that's what I ended up with. Now this, you could hardly even tell this is a figure. It's more of a balanced composition. The figure really disappeared into this composition. In fact, you might even think there was a head at the top and a head at the bottom. So frankly, it really isn't a figure anymore. It's an abstract kind of representation of what I was feeling, the large sweeps that I felt with my hands. You can see that
definitely captures the movement, though.
And this is, I guess this would be akin to a portrait, but an expressive, kind of emotional portrait. It's done with charcoal and graphite and colored Conte crayon. You can see that I've erased the features of the face. I haven't actually necessarily drawn them.
Oh, I see that, yes.
So what I've done is colored it all gray with a chamois, softened it all up, and then removed the parts that I thought would describe it. This is, again, a singular figure type gesture, character. I've used blue ink in this. I've captured the light. I think that's the thing that describes this drawing mostly. There's hardly a face there, and there's frankly hardly a figure. Now this is a combination of many different charcoal materials, yeah. Charcoal and colored Conte and oil sticks and graphite. The beauty of using some transparent materials and some opaque materials is you can cover over the ones that you don't like, and you can keep on building them and keep on changing the drawing till you get the image that you want.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Now these sculptures, they all originate from my drawings. You can see that they're almost line work themselves. So one day I just decided that I wanted to work more three-dimensionally. I took these wires and they are manifestations of the drawings that I've done. This again is the same thing. This was a figure that I drew.
Looks reminiscent of the blue one that you showed us.
It does a little bit, I guess, in the gray. I've used wire and celluclay here.
Very nice. So we're going to be moving on into printmaking. And you have a demonstration that you're going to show us, and you're going to show us some of your prints before that. But tell me a little bit about what types of prints you prefer to make and you're working on now.
Well, I'm not a traditional editioner. An edition in printmaking is that you produce multiples that look exactly the same. So I prefer a monotype process. Mm-hmm. And so you get one image from each time you print, and then you get ghosts of that same print through what is left over with the ink that's left on a monotype plate, for instance. You need a press, printing press, to work this, and I've done other processes, but this is the one that I've settled upon, I guess I would say.
Well, let's take a look at some of your prints, and then we'll move on to the demo.
Okay. So this is a monotype. So basically, a monotype starts with a plastic plate. So I've painted the blue or the green in the background, the turquoise, onto a monotype print, and then I've taken another plate and I've dry pointed onto that plate and printed that on top of the monotype. Now, dry point is a process whereby you scrape into the plastic plate, and I've done that as I do drawings with a very gestural line.
Is that where the black is?
That's right, the black is there. This is a monotype, and this is a monotype using the process that I'm going to demo for you, which is called a Pronto Plate Lithography process. And it basically takes, you can take a photographic image and put it back into your prints and print them.
So that looks like your drawings.
It is, yes. It's my drawing blown up and reduced and changed.
Interesting.
And moved around and doubled up. And this is the same thing. The blue in the background is a process called shinkole. So that's like a Japanese rice paper that has been glued on top. And this is an entirely different process. In this case, this print is about 11 by 15. I began with two large prints that were 22 by 30. And I printed the light gray in the background as a deep black, and I hated it. And so I took the two large sheets, 22 by 30, and I cut them up into 8 little sheets. And this is one of the 8 sheets, and I made a series of them. And
oh, that's nice. So you have sort of a similar background, and then the details on top were different?
That's right. I layered it and printed more on top of that, and I stuck with it, and eventually I loved it. So
excellent.
This is one of a series of 5, and there's 3 that went in a different direction, and I put dry point on top of them. This is, again, a similar process. There's only 3 colors printed here, which is kind of interesting. You've got the black, the dark brown orange, and the light orange. And so this has only been through the press 3 times. It's a large print, 22 by 30, and this again is a drawing, or several drawings of mine that I've cut up and pasted or reproduced back into it.
Interesting.
Again, similar process. In this case, I layered the same drawing over and over and over again into the process by running it through the press many times.
Beautiful.
This is more of a tracing process. So you take a solid black plate and you ink it up with your black ink, and then you put a sheet of paper on top of it, and then you just press at certain points, and you can draw on, and then when you pull the paper up, you end up with the drawing.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah, very different process.
And this is an interesting process, too. This process is one where I did a black background, and then I wiped out the whites.
So now you're going to show us your demonstration, so please.
Pronto Plate Lithography, and that's what it's often called. It's called other things as well. So
tell us about your tools.
So the tools I'm going to use, it's a very simple process, actually. I have here a container of water with a sponge. I have something called gum arabic, which is a binder for pigments, watercolor, for instance. But in this case, I'm just going to use it as a liquid. It's a sticky kind of liquid. This is the ink I'm going to print with. I'll show you that in a minute. This is a Pronto plate for doing Pronto plate lithography. It's just basically a plastic sheet. Now, what I'm going to do, I've chosen an image here. This is a photocopy. It's on photocopy paper. Now, you take this photocopy and you put it in a laser printer. It has to be a laser printer, and it has to be a black laser printer. The color is insignificant. Color laser doesn't matter. So this is, I take this image and I transfer it onto the Pronto plate. And here, I've done this outside of the studio. This is the image on a Pronto plate. Now, I'm going to...
So it was run through the laser printer that plastic sheet was.
And it's a simple process. You just put the plastic plate into your tray, and then it will photocopy straight onto it, and look exactly like that. Now, I'm going to put a little water to make the Pronto plate stick to the table. and then I'll just make sure that that sits down quite a bit. Now the idea of this is that you put the gum arabic onto the plate, and the gum arabic sticks to the white areas. It leaves those areas open, and then when you roll your ink over, it doesn't stick to the toner. The toner rejects the gum arabic. When you roll your ink over the plate, the ink will stick to the black areas. So I'm going to put this. So people do this in different ways. I like to use my hand to make sure that I've covered the drawing completely.
And you use a glove, I see, as well.
I like to use gloves. It's kind of sticky. When you're a printmaker, you have to be careful to keep your process clean, because it's very easy to get ink all over the table and all over you and all over your hands. So eventually you're going to have to pick up this plate that's been inked and put it on the press, and you don't want ink on your press. So I wet the plate, and now I've got the gum arabic sticking to the open areas, and I've got the nothing sticking to the toner. Now I've squeezed out a little bit of red ink here.
What type of ink is that?
This is oil-based ink. There are many different, there's Charbonnel, Daniel Smith used to use, there's many different types. So basically I squeeze out the ink, then I roll it up. You make sure that you pick up the roller each time, and that you get a nice clean cover, and then you make sure that your plate is still wet so that the dry areas don't dry out, and you run this over the plate. And I'm not sure you can see it in the camera, but as you do this, the red ink starts to stick to the black toner. And then you want to put some more water so that you keep those white areas rejecting the red ink. So you keep on doing that and keep on doing that.
So the water does not wash the oil-based ink off?
It does not. It's oil and water, as they say. So then you make sure each time that you take a little bit more ink and you roll it up, and it's starting to get redder. You can see.
How many layers of ink do you usually put on?
I might do 3 or 4. I might do 3 or 4. And you can do this. You can roll this up. You can roll this up, print it, come back, roll it up again. As long as the plate does not dry out in between, you're good to keep on rolling it. So I'll do it one more time. A little bit of water. Squeeze it out. Pick up the excess. And one more roll.
So what's going to show up on the paper that you print on when you put it in the press is bright red.
Bright red, exactly. The black toner does not actually print. Oh. The black toner just is a vehicle for accepting the red ink or whatever ink that you're going to
So it's
print.
A chemical process that you're working with.
That's a good question. Is it a chemical process? I suppose it could be called a chemical process. I'm the artist, not the scientist. So then I pick up the plate, and this is ready to be sandwiched with your good paper. Usually I'll use something like a BFK Reeves, and that will give you a finished image. I'll take my gloves off, because at this point I want to be handling the good paper. Every artist has their own way of working, but I would take this plate and I would put it on the press. Then I would put the clean Pronto plate on it so that I don't get the edges on my clean paper. And then I would put my paper, in this case it's already been printed, face down on the image, and then I would run that through the press. And this is the image when it is finally printed.
Beautiful.
And then once you have this printed, you can go back into it and you can put a black, you can put any colors you want. You can monotype back into it. You could put another photograph on it. So that's called the Pronto Plate Lithography process.
Very nice. So you have some images for us of completed pieces that have multi-layers. Let's take a look at those now.
Okay.
So what is this one?
This one, I did a series of cycle prints. And in this case, it's the Pronto Plate process. That orangey brown is the first Pronto Plate that went down. And I printed the orangey brown. Everything else would have been white. And then I went back into that with that upper yellow and a bit of white. And then at the very end, I came in with a second Pronto Plate, which is the black. And so the combination of the two make for a rather ambiguous imagery that's quite interesting.
But it's based on a bicycle wheel?
It's based on bicycle wheels and shadows. And
so to get the black in that straight line across, did you cut the paper that you started with? Or how did you do that part?
I basically printed to the Pronto, the laser copy to the edge of the Pronto Plate, and I laid the Pronto Plate quite carefully on an angle.
Oh, so
on the sheet.
Okay, interesting.
This is a similar one. It's again meant to be ambiguous, which is for me what makes it interesting. The orange that you see on the left side is printed underneath everything. And then I just came back and I actually printed you can see there's a very light blue there as well. You could do many things you want. Those are printed underneath the last two black Pronto Plate lithography plates in the same way that the other one was. So it's just a kind of a playful way of making the viewer wonder what it is that they're looking at.
Yes, definitely.
Now this is a series of prints that I did for a show in San Francisco, the Meridian Gallery. And these two prints are 22 by 30. They're two separate prints laid side by side. On the right-hand side, I've printed a solid black in behind, and then I've printed the solid, they have to be fairly solid colors on top of that. On the right-hand, all of these marks are my own drawings that have been blown up or twisted, printed maybe even upside down. You can see that some of the, when you print these, the printing isn't meant to be perfect, so sometimes you get a bit of graying happening.
Right.
So the graying is just kind of accidental. And
is this the same process that you showed us, or a different process?
Yes, this is a lithography,
so
a plate lithography
you
process.
can put the orange lines on top of the black in this process.
Yes, they are printed separately. All those colors are printed separately. And the little blue strip that's on the upper left is Japanese rice paper that was painted on previously by me. So I'll use almost anything that I have on hand. I might have it in the studio and I'll just reach over and grab it and think, oh, this might really balance the composition. And I'm really focusing on balancing the composition and the colors and trying to suggest something interesting is going on, as I hope it is in here.
Yes, it's very interesting to me. I like the lines and the gestures very much. So beautiful work, very nice work. So you are part of an artist residency right now. So tell us a little bit about that and how you became involved in it and where you're going with it.
So there is a society called the California Society of Printmakers, and they offer 3 residencies each year. I don't know how long it will last or how long they offer it. And there are different processes. One is the lithography, one is silkscreen, and the other one is a photogravure studio. These are studios that are, 2 of them are in San Francisco, one of them is in Vallejo. And the screen printing workshop is the one I worked with. It's Thomas Wojak's Works Studio in Vallejo. It's a wonderful shop where he does all kinds of, any type of screen printing that you could ask for. And so I worked with him. He was the expert, and I had done the process before, but not as extensive as he had. And so we were able to print 2 of my images, 3 feet by 4 feet wide.
Wow,
and
very large.
Yeah, they're very big, much bigger than the ones behind me. And I'm going to be showing them in the city on the 8th of October at an opening at the Photo Revere Studio.
So was there an application process that you went through?
Yes, it was a juried process that you had to present a portfolio to, and they looked at the portfolio and they balanced whether you're capable of doing it, whether many different things. And so I guess Thomas liked my imagery. It's very, screen printing is a very graphic process. And
Right.
so I did a very graphic image. And so it's very interesting.
Excellent. And you are also part of the Silicon Valley Open Studios as well, right?
That's right.
Can you very briefly,
For many years.
very briefly tell us a little bit about how you show?
So I show in Redwood City. I have a studio in Redwood City on Linden Street, and we are 7 artists in one warehouse and 11 artists in the other. And we open our studios twice a year, one for Redwood City Open Studios and one for Silicon Valley Open Studios. And it's a wonderful way to get your work out in the public, and also to meet the local people, because
Right.
you do meet a lot of the locals, and they appreciate having us as neighbors.
Of course. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being part of Talk Art. This is a fascinating process. Very
Thank you
interesting.
for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.